You saw the old trash can in the thumbnail, the lid tipped back, and a thick carpet of green spilling over the rim, and you thought to yourself, there is no way that man grew food in a garbage can in the dead of winter with no soil. Well, I did, and I am about to walk you out to my potting shed and show you the whole thing. It is February out here. The ground is froze hard as a church floor, the garden is asleep under a foot of snow, and there is not a fresh green leaf to be had for 40 miles that did not ride 1,000 miles on a truck, wilted and dear by the time it reached the store. And yet this morning, I will lift the lid off that old can, take a scissors, and cut a fistful of fresh, living green food for our breakfast, grown in 7 days, on no soil at all, for pennies. Now, I am going to give you the whole 5-minute setup, start to finish. And I am going to be straight with you the way a neighbor would about what is real and the one thing the folks online stretch past the truth. And stay with me to the end, because I am going to show you the one tray I lost the morning I lifted a lid and found a stinking gray slime where my greens should have been, and the exact mistake that killed it. Because there is a white fuzz that means you have grown a perfect crop, and a white fuzz that means you must throw the whole thing out, and they look almost exactly the same. And getting them mixed up is the single most common way a beginner loses his first tray. I will teach you to tell them apart at the very end. First, let me show you how it is done. So, let me give you the whole method first, plain and quick, and then I will tell you why it works. Because the why is one of the prettiest little miracles in all of gardening, and almost nobody understands it. You take a container, an old trash can, a tote, a deep dish pan, a 5-gallon bucket, anything that holds a few inches deep and that you can set a tray into, or you grow right in the bottom of it. Then you take your growing surface, and here's the part that stops people cold. You do not need soil. You can grow these on a few sheets of plain paper towel, on a square of burlap, on an old cotton cloth, on a thin layer of coconut fiber. The seed does not need dirt to sprout. It only needs something damp to hold its little roots. You lay that surface in the bottom, you wet it down good but not swimming, and you scatter your seed thick, far thicker than you would ever plant in the garden, a solid blanket of seed because you are growing a carpet of little shoots. Not full-grown plants. You missed it. You set a lid or a second tray on top to hold in the dark and the damp for the first few days, and you put it in the corner. That is the whole setup. 5 minutes, a handful of seed, a damp cloth, a lid. For the next 3 or 4 days, you leave that lid on and keep it damp. A mist once or twice a day so it never dries. In the dark, under that lid, the seeds swell and split and send down white roots and push up pale shoots, every bit of it running on the food packed inside the seed itself. Then, when those pale shoots are an inch or two tall and lifting the lid, you take the lid off and you give them light. Not blazing sun, just light, a bright windowsill, the north end of a room, a cheap shop light if your winter is dark. In a day or two, those pale shoots turn deep green, and a few days after that, 7 to 14 days from the day you started, you take a scissors and cut that whole green carpet off at the base, wash it, and eat it. Fresh living greens in the dead of winter, grown on a wet rag in a trash can, for pennies, a tray. Now let me tell you why this works. Because once you understand it, you will never look at a seed the same way again. A seed is not empty. A seed is a packed lunch. Inside every seed, the mother plant tucked away a store of food. Starch and oil and protein, everything a baby plant needs to get itself going before it can feed itself. That is why a seed can sprout in the dark on a bare wet cloth with no soil and no fertilizer and no sun. For those first days of its life, the little plant is not eating from the ground or the light at all. It is living off the lunch its mother packed. It is spending down the seed. And a microgreen is just a baby plant you harvest right at that stage while it is still living off that packed lunch, before it ever needed soil, while every bit of the seed's stored goodness is right there in the tender little shoot. That is why you do not need dirt. That is why it is so fast. That is why a handful of cheap seed becomes a meal of greens in a week. You are harvesting the seed's own packed lunch turned green and tender and alive on your windowsill. And that is also the honest answer to the no sun business, so let me deal with it square, because I will not lie to you to keep you watching. The seed sprouts in the dark just fine. On its own packed lunch, that part is true. But to turn green, a plant has to have light, even a little, because green is the color of a plant making food from light, and a plant in pure darkness cannot make that green. Grow your microgreens in a pitch black closet, and what you get is not a green microgreen, it is a pale, leggy, yellow-white shoot, what the old-timers called a blanched shoot. Now, some of those pale shoots are good eating, blanched, and mild, and in hard times, folks grew them that way on purpose in cellars. But if you want that deep green, vitamin-rich little leaf, you have to give the shoots a few days of light at the end. So when you see a fellow online promise you greens in a closet with no light at all, know that he is selling you a half-truth. No soil, true. No direct sun, true. But no light at all, no. A little light at the end is what makes them green. I would rather tell you the truth and have you grow a good crop than tell you a tall tale and have you grow a tray of pale disappointment. Now, where does this come from? Because I did not invent it. No old man invents anything. Folks have sprouted seeds for food for as long as there have been seeds. But the time it really mattered, the time it was written down plain and taught to everybody, was the war years. In the Second World War, when the ships were carrying soldiers instead of oranges, and fresh food was rationed and scarce, the government and the home magazines taught people to grow their own greens indoors through the winter. Sprouts and shoots on trays in the kitchen, so a family penned up in a cold northern city could still get something fresh and living onto the table. The Victory Garden was not just the plot out back. It was the tray of greens on the windowsill too. And then the war ended. The trucks started running again. The grocery store filled up with lettuce hauled from far-off warm places, and a whole country forgot it had ever known how to grow a green in a can in February. It did not get banned. It just got dropped, forgotten, the way everything cheap and good gets forgotten the minute somebody can sell you the store-bought version instead. The Amish and the old Plain families never forgot it because they never got in the habit of needing the store in the first place. The knowledge just kept passing down quiet, hand to hand, in the houses where the trucks never mattered much. Let me give you the method in full now with the details that make the difference between a good tray and a moldy mess, because there is one mistake everybody makes and I want you to skip it. And it ties right into that lost tray I promised you, so pay attention here. First, the seed. You want seed meant for eating, not treated garden seed, because some garden seed is coated with a fungicide you do not want anywhere near your food. The cheapest and best to start with are seeds you can buy by the pound for food, not in little garden packets. Sunflower seed, the black oil kind, makes a thick, nutty green and is my favorite. Pea seed, the whole dried peas, makes sweet pea shoots that taste like the first day of spring. Radish seed is fast and peppery and almost foolproof for a beginner. Broccoli, mustard, beet, all good. Buy them by the pound and a few dollars of seed grows trays and trays all winter. Second, the soaking. The bigger seeds, the sunflower and the pea, do best soaked in water overnight first, 6 to 12 hours, before you spread them, because they have a hard coat and a big lunch to wake up. The little seeds, radish and broccoli and mustard, you do not soak, you just scatter them dry on the wet surface. Third, and this is the mistake everybody makes, the watering. Too much water is what ruins a tray, every time. If your growing surface sits in standing water, or you keep it soaking wet and warm with no air moving, it goes sour, and then it goes moldy. And that is the gray slime I found the morning I lost my tray. Here is the trick, and it is the whole secret to never losing one again. Keep it damp, not wet. Mist it, do not flood it. There should never be water standing in the bottom of the tray. And once you take the lid off, give it some air moving, even just the door to the room left open. Because still, wet, warm, closed up air is exactly what mold loves. And a breath of moving air stops it cold. Damp, not wet, and a breath of air. Burn that into your mind, and you will never lose a tray to rot. Let me walk you through which ones to grow, because each has its own character, and a winter shelf with 3 or 4 kinds going is a fine and cheerful thing in a cold house. Sunflower shoots are my staple. Thick and crunchy and nutty, near a meal on their own, wonderful in a sandwich or just by the handful. Pea shoots are sweet and tender, and the children will eat them like candy. Radish shoots are the fastest, ready in as little as 6 or 7 days, with a bright peppery bite that wakes up a plate of plain winter food. Broccoli shoots are mild, grow into a soft green carpet, and are about the most nourishing thing on the whole list. Mustard for heat, beet for a deep red stem and an earthy taste, buckwheat, cress, the list runs long. Start with radish and pea and sunflower, the 3 most foolproof, and once you have the knack, you can grow most any green seed this way. And here's the trick that keeps you in greens all season. You stagger them. You do not grow one big tray and eat it all at once. You start a small new tray every 3 or 4 days, so there is always one coming ripe as you finish the last, a little assembly line of green going on your shelf right through the worst of the winter. 5 minutes every few days, and you are never without. Now let me say a true word about what is actually in these little shoots without stretching it past where the truth will hold, because this part is real, and it matters for an old body in the cold months. A seed at the moment of sprouting is at the richest, most concentrated point of its whole life. It is loading itself up to build an entire plant, and a young microgreen shoot carries that concentrated goodness, more of certain vitamins by weight than the full-grown plant will ever have. That is not a sales claim, that is just the nature of a sprouting seed. And it is exactly why a fresh green in February does an old body so much good after a winter of nothing but stored potatoes and canned things. You are eating the plant at the most alive it will ever be. But I will not let a true thing get stretched into a lie, so hear the other half. A tray of microgreens is a fistful of fresh greens. It is not bushels of food. It will not feed a family through a famine. And any man who tells you a trash can of shoots will make you self-sufficient is stretching it past the truth. Know it for exactly what it is, the freshest living food in the house, cheap and fast in any month, and it will never once disappoint you. Now, I gave you the no-soil way first because it surprises people and because it is the cheapest. But let me give you the second method, the soil tray, because for a bigger, hardier crop, it is worth knowing. Instead of a wet cloth, you put an inch or so of plain potting soil or finished compost in the bottom of the tray. You firm it flat, you wet it, and you scatter your seed thick on top, just the same. The soil holds more water and more food than a bare cloth, so the shoots grow a touch bigger and stronger, and you can let them run a day or 2 longer. And for the big seeds like sunflower and pea, the soil gives the roots something to grab onto. You cut them the same way, at the base, just above the soil. The bare cloth way is cheaper and cleaner for the kitchen counter. The soil way grows a fuller crop out in the shed. I run both, and you will find which suits your house. And there is a tweak that doubles your crop, the thing that turns a thin floppy tray into a thick standing carpet. So write this one down. When the seeds are first pushing up under the lid, give the whole tray a gentle weight for the first day or 2. A second tray with a little water in it set right down on top of the seeds. That gentle pressure makes the little shoots push harder against it and come up thicker, stronger, more even, with better roots. So when you lift the weight off and give them light, they stand up tall and dense instead of thin and leggy. A little weight early, and you cut a thicker, prettier crop. It is the oldest trick the market growers use, and it costs you nothing but a spare tray. Now, before I bring you to that lost tray I promised you at the start, let me make the light easy for you, since I have been honest that you do need a little of it, so the dark winter is no excuse. A bright windowsill is plenty, the north side of the house even, because these shoots do not need the strong direct sun a full plant wants, only enough to turn green and stand sturdy for their last few days. If your winter is long and gray and your windows are dim, a single cheap shop light hung a foot over the tray, run through the daylight hours, does the whole job for a few cents of power and will green up a tray in the darkest cellar. You are not trying to ripen a tomato. You are only asking a baby shoot to turn green, and that takes very little light indeed. Remember that lost tray I told you about? We are almost to it, and the light has nothing to do with what killed it. I want to be clear. That one was the water. But a starved, lightless, leggy tray is its own kind of failure, and I would not have you trade one for the other. Give them their few days of light at the end, and they will reward you. I will tell you about a fellow I knew, Mose Hostetler, an old plain man who kept greens going all winter in his cold cellar room, with nothing but trays and a single dim window. Mose said a man who eats nothing but stored potatoes and canned things from October to April feels it in his body by spring, feels slow and worn and gray, and that a little fresh green every day through the winter was worth more to an old body than any tonic from the store. He was right. There is something in a fresh living green, just cut, that a thing hauled 1,000 miles and sitting a week in a cooler has plainly lost. Mose grew his own by that window all winter for pennies, and he was the spryest old man in the church well into his 80s. He is the one who taught me the staggering and the gentle weight, and he is the one who taught me the hard way about the gray slime. Because the first tray I ever lost, I lost in his cellar while he stood there. And let me make the mistake so I would never forget it. So here is the lost tray, and the whole point of it, the thing I promised you at the start, I had flooded it. I had been so eager I kept it soaking wet. Standing water in the bottom, lid clamped down tight, no air set near the warm stovepipe. I lifted that lid on the fourth morning expecting green and found a flat, gray, slimy, sour-smelling ruin, the whole tray spoiled overnight. That is real mold, and that is a dead tray. Throw it out, scrub the tray with a little vinegar, and start again, drier and cooler and with air. Now here's the part that saves your crops for the rest of your life. The two white fuzzes, because this is what makes good beginners quit. A day or two after your seeds sprout, especially the radish and the broccoli, you will often see a fine white fuzz appear all over the roots. And 9 times out of 10, a beginner sees it, thinks mold, and throws out a perfect crop in a panic. So learn the difference now. Harmless root hairs are bright white, fine as down. They grow right out of the roots themselves in a neat halo around each root. They smell of nothing at all. And here's the test that settles it. You give the tray a light mist, and the root hairs lie down flat and seem to vanish into the root. Real mold is different. Real mold is grayer or bluer. It grows in patches and webs across the surface and up the stems, not just on the roots. It smells musty and sour, and a mist does not make it disappear. It just sits there wet. Bright white on the roots vanishes when misted, smells of nothing, that is root hairs, and your crop is perfect. Grayish in patches up the stems, musty, stays put when misted, that is mold, and it goes in the compost. That one piece of knowing has saved more first trays than anything else I could teach you, and now it is yours. So why grow a green in a can when the store has a whole wall of lettuce? Because that wall of lettuce came 1,000 miles, picked days or weeks ago, sprayed and washed and bagged in plastic, and it costs you a little more every single year. Your tray on the windowsill is alive until the second you cut it. It cost you a handful of seed, and it is ready in a week, any month of the year. The store would much rather you never knew you could. There is no money in a man who grows his own greens in a can in the corner. I am not asking you to take my word for any of it. Set one tray tonight, a handful of radish seed on a wet paper towel in any old container, a lid for 3 days, then light and keep it damp, never wet, with a breath of air. In a week, you will cut your first greens in the dead of winter, and you will not believe you ever paid $4 for a little plastic box of them. Tell me your county and what you are growing under your own snow down in the comments, and I will read every one. After 60 years working this same ground, I will tell you the folks who came through the hard winters before us never sat all season eating nothing but what was canned. They kept a little green growing in the corner, alive all year, the way their grandparents had. We forgot it because the store made it easy to forget. The folks who settled this country